So back
everybody?
in
Welcome to our
2023,
live stream
I made a
tonight.
statement that raised some eyebrows. I said, America doesn't need another Billy Graham. We need a new generation of desert fathers. Now, at first, that may sound like I'm taking a shot at Billy Graham. And let me be clear, I'm not. Billy Graham was a faithful man of God who preached the gospel to more people than anyone in history. He filled stadiums, preached to presidents, and carried the name of Jesus onto the front pages of newspapers worldwide. If you want to go in a little deeper in what I think about the whole Billy Graham era, I encourage you to go get my book, Carriers of His Presence. You can find it on Amazon or anywhere where they sell books. But in this book, I talk about the traveling prophet, 3 areas that brought us to where we're at as a nation. I believe this follows a parallel with Israel back in the days of from Eli to David. I believe we're in that same parallel as a nation, and we experience 3 levels of dysfunction in church culture that brings us to the moment we're at as a nation, and that's the compromised priesthood, the traveling prophet, and the political king. And so for those of you that have never gotten this book, you need to go check that out. But here's the hard truth, okay? We've had stadiums filled. We've had crusades. We've had people make decisions, but many churches' altars are empty. They don't have real biblical community. They have people that go to church together, but they don't have biblical community. And yes, decisions are made, but very little discipleship. And the evidence is staring us in the face because in the decades since Graham's heyday, America hasn't grown more Christian. We've actually grown what I don't like this terminology, but I think you'll get what I'm saying when I say we've grown more secular. And that's why I believe with everything in me that this is not the hour for another Billy Graham. This is the hour for a new generation of desert fathers. I want you to think about it. Billy Graham's crusades reached over 215 million people in person, and more than 2.2 million people made decisions for Christ. And yet here we are in 2025, and America is projected by Pew Research to become a majority non-Christian nation by 2070. So what does that tell us? It's telling us that large gatherings, emotional decisions, and national headlines don't equal long-term transformation. Guys, you can fill a stadium in a moment, but you cannot disciple a nation in a moment. And here's the problem. American Christianity has been chasing the stadiums. We've been spending millions of dollars into 1-day events or 3-day events, and yet we wouldn't ever dare put millions of dollars into a place that could carry on and perpetuate for generations to come. I think there's something wrong with that. So we have people chasing stadiums and people chasing the conferences and people chasing viral moments, but it hasn't been in the church that I've seen outside of just a handful of people that are getting this message. But we haven't been really thinking about formation. It hasn't been about depth. And even Billy Graham himself admitted that this was a problem. Back in an interview that I found with the U.S. News and World Report back in 1993, Graham said these words. Here were the words of Billy Graham himself. He said, "My greatest regret is that we have not done enough to follow up and disciple those who come forward." Friend, did you hear that? The man who filled stadiums with tens of thousands, his one regret wasn't that he didn't preach enough. It was that he didn't disciple enough, because decisions without discipleship, they don't last. Guys, have you ever been to a stadium concert? The lights, the crowd, the atmosphere, it's electric. You get goosebumps. You feel part of something so much bigger than yourself. The last concert that I was at was a Ben Rector concert. It was absolutely phenomenal. But guys, the lights fade. You get in your car, you sit in traffic, and by the time that you pull into your driveway, the magic's gone. That's the stadium effect. It's not that it wasn't real in the moment. It's that it wasn't sustainable when you left the concert. And that's what happens with much of American revivalism is we fill stadiums with decisions, but when people went home, they weren't formed into disciples. They weren't integrated into communities of apprenticeship. They weren't rooted in rhythms of prayer and scripture and obedience and worship. And so the fire burned bright in the stadium, but it went out when the lights did. Now contrast that with the desert fathers of the 3rd and 4th century of the church. These weren't men chasing stadiums. These were men that went out into the desert for solitude. They weren't trying to fill coliseums with converts. They were trying to empty themselves before God. Anthony the Great didn't need a crowd. He went into the desert, and yet thousands followed him because they saw a depth of life that Rome's glittering cathedrals could not produce. See, the desert fathers weren't celebrities. They were fathers. They weren't chasing applause. They were after the heart of Christ. And in their hiddenness, they birthed movements that outlasted empires. And I believe that's exactly what America needs right now. Guys, just take a look around at where we are today. Church attendance in America is at a historic low. Scandals among celebrity pastors have rocked trust, and social media has produced more influencers than fathers and more performers than disciplers. And you know what? The world doesn't need more influencers. I keep saying that. It doesn't need more stadium preachers. It doesn't need another round of Christian celebrities. What it needs is fathers, mothers, hidden ones, people who have gone deep into the wilderness with God and come out carrying wisdom, not just charisma, formation, not performance, presence, not just platforms. And that's why I said, and why I'm saying it again, America doesn't need another Billy Graham. America needs desert fathers. And guys, I understand that this can seem a little hypocritical since I'm going public with this message, but guys, I've had 10 years of an ebb and flow of hiddenness and then coming out only when I feel called to speak. But I've been in 10 years of going through a process of formation with the Lord, Him showing me what is the will of God for my life, Him showing me what is not the will of God for my life. I feel like the past 10 years, the Lord took me through a crazy transformation where I've been trying to figure things out and do things on my own and realize that's not it. Even to the point of thinking that God had called me to pastor a church in the American traditional sense, only to realize God reminded me of my encounter when I was 18. He said, shepherd a movement. And I tried to shepherd a church in the traditional American sense. And the Lord said, I didn't ask you to shepherd a church. I asked you to shepherd a movement. And there are many times, I've never said this publicly, but there are many times that God will give us the thing that we think we want just to prove it's not really of us to do. And through those very hard moments of transition and fallout and people not understanding all of those things, what happens is God takes us through the fire of His furious love and brings us out like gold on the other side. So I've been through 10 years of that, and I just now feel like I'm actually stepping in to my most authentic place. And so I believe hiddenness is just as powerful as going public, because if you never experience seasons of hiddenness, you'll never have anything truly to say or bring to the table in public. So, guys, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm Mark Casto, and this is the Mark Casto Program.
Welcome to the Mark Casto Program, where we challenge the old systems, tear down chaos, and build with kingdom clarity. Here, we equip a generation of wise messengers like you to turn God-given wisdom into lasting impact and real wealth. Let's dive in.
Guys, I walked away from the safety of a paycheck and the four-walled pastor model to build a business, a digital product business from scratch, starting with the last few dollars in my bank account and a conviction that God still speaks. There was a risk that I had to take on a whisper from God, and today that leap has turned into a 6, soon to be 7-figure business, and I'm on a mission to help kingdom entrepreneurs do the same. So I want to help you package your God-given wisdom into income, influence, and impact. And guys, this podcast isn't just about business strategies. It's really about equipping a new generation of wise messengers to rise above the noise of a polarized world, to speak with clarity into the cultural issues of our day, and to build businesses that flow from wholeness, not hustle. And guys, here on this podcast, we believe wisdom is greater than entertainment, that wealth is a tool for kingdom impact, and that cultural renewal won't come from politics or platforms, but from a people who refuse to burn out or sell out and instead choose to live fully present, fully alive, and fully aligned with what Abba has called them to build. So if you're ready to unlock that wisdom inside you, build a business that creates freedom, and step into your calling as a voice of clarity in a confused generation, I want to welcome you. You're in the right place. This is the Mark Casto program. Now, guys, let's start here, okay? Billy Graham was, without question, one of the most influential Christian figures of the 20th century. He preached to more than 185 nations. He advised presidents. He filled stadiums on nearly every continent. In fact, it's estimated that over 215 million people heard him live. And through television and radio, that number swells into the billions. And in those stadiums, over 2.2 million people walked an aisle, filled out a card, or raised their hand to say yes to Jesus. I want you to think about that for a minute. Millions of decisions for Christ, okay? And on paper, it looks like a revival on a scale the world has never seen. But here's the hard reality. Decisions don't automatically become disciples. Guys, even Billy Graham admitted this in 1993, reflecting, I've already said this to you once before, but I want to remind you, 1993, he said, "My greatest regret is that we've not done enough to follow up and disciple those who came forward." He knew it, guys. He knew the gap between an emotional decision in a stadium and a life of faithful apprenticeship to Jesus. And he knew that the gap was enormous. And the truth is, American Christianity has been living in that gap ever since. Guys, sociologists, I was looking at a study. Sociologists actually did a study on the decision cards from different crusades. And guys, the data is sobering. While millions made decisions, the percentage that remained active in a church a year later was often in single digits. So in other words, 90% of the quote unquote fruit never made it past the first season. And guys, it's not that God didn't move in those moments. He did. But without discipleship, without fathers and mothers walking with those people day by day, moment by moment, the fire didn't last. And here's the kicker. During the same decades that stadiums were filled with people coming forward, America was moving in an opposite direction culturally. Guys, in 1972, over 90% of Americans identified as Christian. By 2023, that number has dropped to 63%. Some numbers are even lower than that. And Pew Research projects by 2070, Christians would be a minority in America. So here's the tension. Millions of decisions, declining Christian influence, stadiums filled, but churches emptying? What does that tell us? It tells us that crusades alone, these big conferences, this conference model does not disciple nations. Guys, I'm telling you, if you have not read this book, this is a new blueprint for the church. I want to encourage you. I keep picking this up. I wrote this back in 2023. I believe it's more powerful now and more needed and necessary now than it's ever been before. So if you've not gotten a copy of Carriers of His Presence, you need to go check that out on Amazon. Guys, because I'm telling you, conference Christianity, stadium event Christianity, it does not work for long-term fruit. It's a waste of money, and it gives us no long-term fruit. So I want you to think of it like this. Stadium evangelism is like fireworks. Bright, loud, impressive. Everybody talks about it. but fireworks disappear almost as quickly as they explode. Discipleship, on the other hand, is like a candle. It's small, steady, maybe unimpressive in the moment, but a candle can light another candle and another and another until the whole room is filled with light. See, fireworks grab attention. Candles sustain transformation. And for too long, American Christianity has been addicted to fireworks. Now, let's be honest. Graham was more than a preacher. He was a cultural phenomenon. His crusades were headline news. Presidents like Eisenhower and Kennedy, Johnson and Nixon all leaned on him. And in many ways, Graham became America's pastor. He embodied a kind of civil religion, Christian values wrapped in national identity. But that's part of the problem. Christianity became event-driven, celebrity-driven, media-driven. It shaped headlines, but it didn't reshape households. Because discipleship doesn't happen in stadiums. It happens in kitchens and living rooms and small circles of people walking together in obedience. I read a historian one time by the name of George Marsden, and he put it pretty bluntly when he said, Graham's crusades were cultural events as much as religious ones. They provided a sense of shared morality in a divided time, but they were less effective at producing lasting spiritual communities. Did you catch that? Cultural events shared morality, but not translating to spiritual communities. And that's why America looks the way that it does today. Now hear me. Again, I'm not here to bash Billy Graham. I honor his obedience, his faithfulness, his courage. But here's what I am saying. The fruit of that model, okay, hear what I'm saying, not the man. The fruit of the model alone was not enough to actually change and transform our nation. It stirred decisions, but it didn't create disciples. It filled stadiums, but it didn't build households. And so here we are a generation later realizing that America doesn't need another Billy Graham crusade. America needs something deeper, something hidden, something ancient. And that's where the Desert Fathers come in. Now, here's the question that we've got to wrestle with, okay? If stadiums full of people making decisions for Christ didn't change the long-term trajectory of America, then why? Why didn't the Jesus People movement in the 1970s turn into a Jesus nation in the 2000s? Why did we baptize thousands in the Pacific Ocean only to see a generation later that most of those movements fizzled out, leaving behind music and nostalgia, but very little structural transformation? Because here's the truth, guys. Mass gatherings don't change nations. Formation does. So let's talk about the Jesus People movement, okay? 1960s, 1970s, hippies started turning to Jesus. There were beach baptisms, barefoot preachers with guitars, and a radical explosion of new faith. Guys, it was real. It was powerful. It produced songs we still sing today, churches that still exist, and leaders who shaped an era. But guys, again, we have to be honest. Did it shift the trajectory of America? No. Because even as the Jesus People were singing worship on the beaches, the broader culture was being discipled by consumerism, individualism, and eventually the rise of secularism. And here's the point. What shapes culture is not a one-time event. It's the slow drip of daily formation. Guys, sociologist Christian Smith, he did a landmark study of American youth called Soul Searching. And you can look this up. And you know what he discovered? That the dominant faith of American teenagers, many from Christian homes, was something he called more moralistic therapeutic deism. Now, that's a mouthful, but you can go check out this study for yourself. Moralistic therapeutic deism. Basically, here was what they believed. Be nice, feel good, and God exists somewhere in the background, but it doesn't really matter. Now, here's the kicker. These were the children of revival. the offspring of crusades, conferences, and movements, and yet their actual formation was shallow, moralistic, and consumer-driven. Because decisions at an altar don't override the daily discipleship of a culture. Guys, that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I know that my voice going through this podcast can disciple more people than what many ministries are doing today. Think of it like this, guys. A waterfall looks powerful. It crashes down, loud and overwhelming, but a waterfall doesn't carve rock. A drip does. A slow, steady drip of water can carve canyons. That's formation. And culture's shaped the same way, guys, not by waterfalls of revival every few decades, but by the slow drip of formation day after day, year after year. Guys, events can stir hearts. They can awaken something. They can spark something. They can mark a generation, but by themselves, they cannot sustain transformation. Why? Because the events are moments, and discipleship is a process. Jesus didn't say, go and make converts. He said, go and make disciples. And discipleship can't happen in stadiums. It happens in relationships, in households, in small communities of accountability where people can gather around the presence of Jesus. One of the great theologians that I love to read was a man by the name of Dallas Willard. And he once said, the idea of doing evangelism without discipleship is like building airplanes without wings. You can build the body, you can paint it, polish it, and make it look impressive, but without wings, that plane isn't going anywhere. And without discipleship, all those decisions don't take flight. We see the same thing in Christian conference culture. Tens of thousands gather. I help lead a ministry like this, guys, so I can talk about this. Music's incredible. The speakers are powerful. People cry, people repent, people recommit. But a month later, I saw this with my own eyes because I hosted conferences where thousands of people came from all over the place in Cleveland, Tennessee, and at the same time still traveled 42 weekends out of the year going to a lot of the churches who would come to our conferences. I got to see this firsthand experience. They would come to our conferences, have amazing encounters, go back to their church. A month later, I'd go to their church. Many are back in the same cycles because the conference didn't rewire their daily habits. They didn't get an actual obsession or relationship with Jesus, and so they just live from conference to conference. Guys, and I'm not saying it's not that the conferences are totally wrong. They can be catalytic moments. I agree, but they aren't enough. They were never meant to replace fathers, mothers, communities, and formation that happens through pastors and church leaders. And guys, that's why I believe the Desert Fathers matter so much in this conversation. They weren't about moments. They were about a way of life. They weren't interested in a crowd. They were interested in character. They didn't chase the spectacular. They chased the sustainable. And out of their hiddenness came movements that lasted centuries, not days. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever built a fire? And guys, if you have, you know the difference between kindling and firewood. See, kindling burns quick, hot, and fast, but it dies out unless it catches something heavier, okay? Firewood, however, burns slow. It's what keeps the fire alive through the night. See, revival events are kindling, necessary to ignite the fire, but discipleship communities are the firewood. Without them, the flame always dies. Now let's zoom out, okay? America has had more revivals, crusades, and movements than almost any nation on the earth. The Great Awakenings, tent revivals, healing crusades, the charismatic renewal, the Jesus movement, Promise Keepers, passion conferences, the list can go on, Jesus culture. Each one of those things were powerful. Each one was real, and I believe each one was sincere. And yet the trajectory of our nation has not shifted toward greater Christ-likeness. Why? Because we substituted moments for movements. We thought the waterfall was enough, when in reality, it is the drip that was always going to change the rock. So when I say America doesn't need another Billy Graham, here's what I mean. America doesn't need another wave of decisions that fizzle out. What America needs is a generation of men and women who refuse to be formed by events and instead choose the way of discipleship. A generation who carries the heart of the desert fathers, not chasing applause, but realizing your life becomes a model and that model brings about formation in other people. Guys, because the reality is nations aren't changed by stadiums. They're changed by people who say yes to a single focus on a life of one thing, focus on Jesus. Okay? Now, let me stop here and say that this episode, okay, is of the Mark Casto program is sponsored by Wise Builders Creator Academy. Guys, if you're a kingdom leader, if you're a messenger, a voice, an entrepreneur with wisdom that needs to be packaged into a digital product business, then this is for you. Inside the academy, I'm going to walk you step by step to turn your God-given wisdom into income, influence, and impact. And this isn't just another course. It's a community of wise builders learning how to escape the 9-to-5 grind and build businesses that actually change lives. So if you're serious about building your digital product business, I want you to go apply to work with us today at markcasto.co/academy. That's markcasto.co/academy, okay? Guys, I hope you're tracking with me today. I hope this is helpful to you. Let's jump back in. Let's talk about the Desert Fathers, okay? Because this is the part of the story that most modern Christians have never been told, okay? Picture this. The year is around 300 AD. Christianity has just been legalized by Constantine. So for the very first time in history, being a Christian is not dangerous. In fact, it's becoming fashionable. Cathedrals are being built. Bishops are gaining influence. The faith of the martyrs is now the faith of the empire. But in the middle of this new respectability, some men and women looked around and said, this is not the way. They saw the faith that once turned the world upside down being co-opted by politics, by culture, by empire. And so they fled. They fled not because they hated the world, but because they refused to conform to it. They went into the deserts of Egypt and Syria, and at that time, Palestine, not to escape life, but to find it. The most famous of them was a man by the name of Anthony. This man had an encounter with Jesus where he heard the words in Matthew 19, go sell what you possess and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. So at age 20, he sold his inheritance, he gave the money away, walked into the desert, he lived in caves, he ate little, but he prayed constantly. And here's what's crazy. People followed him. Crowds left the cities to come find him in the wilderness. Why? Because they saw a man who wasn't playing games with the empire. They saw a man who had been so formed by solitude, by prayer, by radical obedience. Anthony became known as the father of monks. He never set out to start a movement, but his life became a seed. And that seed birthed an entire stream of Christianity that preserved the faith through centuries of darkness. Guys, these men, like St. Anthony, their wisdom was passed down in little sayings. They were short, simple, but they were piercing. See, they would call him Abba Anthony, meaning they looked at him as a father. So Abba Anthony once said, a time is coming when men will go mad. And when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him saying, you are mad. You are not like us. Does that sound like anything that's going on in the culture today? We see a sick society today that if you have peace, if you have joy, if you're a positive person, they think you've gone mad. They think something's wrong with you. We're living in that time today. There's another desert father by the name of Abba Moses. He said, go, sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything. Guys, these weren't tweets or Instagram quotes. These were lives boiled down to wisdom. They lived slow, hidden, faithful. Guys, you could say that the Desert Fathers were like a reset button for Christianity. When the church got too comfortable with empire, they reminded us that the gospel isn't about power. It's about the presence of Jesus in the life of one committed to union. When the faith got too focused on crowds, they reminded us that God forms people in hiddenness. When culture tried to make Christianity respectable, they reminded us that following Jesus has always been radical. Now, let me be clear. The Desert Fathers weren't perfect. Some went too extreme. Some became hermits that lost touch with reality. But the point isn't that we copy their lifestyle. The point is that we learn from their posture. Maybe some ways we need to copy their lifestyle, but I think the point is that we learn from their posture, their refusal to let the faith be watered down by empire, entertainment, or applause. And if that was necessary in the 4th century, how much more in 2025? And I want you to think about the American church for a second. We now have the ability to fill stadiums. We've got mega churches. We've got celebrities and influencers now. But the question is, do we have fathers? Do we have mothers? Do we have wise ones who aren't chasing the stage, but are actually forming sons and daughters? And the Desert Fathers remind us, you don't change the world by filling coliseums. You change the world by forming people who look like Jesus. Now, let's start to bring this thing home. Why do I believe America needs Desert Fathers right now? More than it needs another stadium crusade, more than it needs another wave of celebrity pastors. Because the fruit is in front of us, guys. We've had decades of events, movements, conferences, and hype. And yet our nation has never been more divided, more disoriented, or more deconstructed. Guys, the data doesn't lie. According to Barna, only 31% of U.S. adults regularly attend a church. That's down from over 70% just 30 years ago. Gallup reports that belief in God has dropped to its lowest point in recorded history, 81%, down from 98% in the 1950s. And Pew Research projects that by 2070, Christians may no longer be the majority in America. I want you to think about that. In the same nation where Billy Graham filled Yankee Stadium in 1957 with 100,000 people singing "Just As I Am," we are now raising a generation who doesn't even know who Jesus is. And guys, that tells me one thing. The old methods aren't enough for this hour. And if that weren't enough, guys, look at headlines. Look at the celebrity pastor scandals, one after another. Megachurch leaders have risen like rockets and fallen just as fast. Guys, we've built platforms, but we're not building people. We've built brands, but we don't build up our brothers. We've built shows, but we don't raise up actual shepherds. And guys, I'm just going to tell you, the watching world has noticed. Do you know that surveys say is one of the top reasons that young people leave the church? Hypocrisy. It's not that they don't believe in God. They just don't trust the people who represent him. And you can't fix hypocrisy with another conference. You can only fix it with fathers. And that's why the Desert Fathers, I believe, are so relevant for us today. They remind us that the way forward is not louder. It's about going deeper. Not bigger, being truer. Not more visible, more faithful. Guys, these men didn't chase applause. They were after authenticity. They weren't performers. These guys were practitioners. And that's what we need right now. And let me say it this way. Influencers, they can certainly inspire you for a moment, but a father can form you for a lifetime. An influencer gives you content. A father brings the presence of Jesus into your life. An influencer shows you the highlights. A father shows you his scars. An influencer, they can shift your mood, but a father will shape your character. And America is drowning in influencers, but starving for fathers. There's a man that I love to read, another pastor. His name is Eugene Peterson. He once said the great danger of this age is that religion becomes a consumer enterprise. Guys, isn't that exactly what we've seen? Church as a product, sermons as content, worship as a playlist. But the Desert Fathers remind us that following Jesus is not consumption. It's crucifixion. It's crucifixion that leads to a resurrection. It's laying down your old life so that you can have a new one. It's not a brand. It's a way of life. And so I believe that God's raising up a new generation of desert fathers and mothers. No, not people who literally go live in caves, but people who choose the cave over the stage, people who choose hiddenness over hype, people who choose formation over fame. Kingdom entrepreneurs. Let me talk to you. We need kingdom entrepreneurs who build businesses that reflect integrity. We need thought leaders who speak with wisdom, not just hot takes. We need parents who disciple their children in the way, not just in church attendance. And this is what America needs right now, guys. Not more noise, not more celebrity, not more fireworks, but slow, steady, faithful people who remind us what it means to be true followers of the way. I want you to think of it like a tree. Everybody sees the branches, everybody admires the fruit, but you don't get fruit without roots. And American Christianity has been obsessed with branches. Look at the reach, look at the size, look at the numbers. But what happens when the wind blows? Without roots, the whole thing topples. See, the Desert Fathers teach us how to grow roots again. Roots of prayer, roots of character, roots of hiddenness, roots of simplicity of life. And guys, if we don't recover those roots, our branches will not matter. So let me just say it plainly. God is not impressed with our stadiums. He is not impressed with our productions. He's not impressed with our ability to trend on social media. He's looking for fathers, for mothers, for people who will say, I don't care if anyone ever knows my name, as long as I'm faithful. That's what changes nations. That's what America needs. Now, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that we're building right now. It's called Long Path Studios, a media hub for kingdom creators. We are believing, I'm not saying that the Holy Spirit told me this or that the Holy Spirit's speaking to 100 people. I'm saying I'm believing for 100 people that believe in what we're doing, in our voice, our ministry, our business. If I need 100 people to invest $1,000 into this vision. Why? Because we're building more than a studio. We're building a movement, a place where voices of wisdom can be amplified, where kingdom entrepreneurs and messengers can step behind a mic or a camera and release clarity into the culture that's drowning in noise. Okay. And if you want to be a part of that, we're going to put your name. Listen to this. We're doing a Long Path Founders plaque that we're going to put in our studio where we can honor you publicly. And most importantly, you'll know that you helped build the platform that will raise up wise messengers for decades to come. So if you'd like to invest in what we're doing, if you'd like to donate and help us, and it's all tax deductible, by the way, so you'll get a tax receipt at the end of the year. All you have to do is go to markcasto.co/donate. That's markcasto.co/donate. You can see it there at the bottom of your screen if you're watching this live. And join us in building Long Path Studios. I'm going to put your name on a plaque for every $1,000 investment. And you say, Mark, well, I'm not able to do the $1,000. Guys, then do 500, do 100, do $5, $10, $20. Every little bit counts when everybody pitches in. So if you believe in what we're doing, if you're excited about what we're doing, you want to invest and do that, we'd love to give you a tax-deductible receipt at the end of the year for your donation. It would be much appreciated. Now, if America doesn't need another Billy Graham, but it does need a new generation of desert fathers, what does that actually look like? Guys, you know that I'm always going to break this down into the practical. I feel like my mind thinks like an engineer, so it's like, I love big vision, but I want to know how it actually works. So it's like, I want to make this thing, I want to put some wheels to it. I want to put some feet to it. Guys, the reality is, let's just be honest. Most of us aren't going to sell everything that we have, move into a cave, and eat a handful of lentils every day. And that's not really my point, okay? The point isn't copying their lifestyle verbatim. The point is embodying their posture, their spirit, their way of life. And if we translate that into our moment, here's what I believe a new desert father generation looks like. Number one is we have a group of fathers that resist addiction to platform. Guys, there's no doubt we live in the influencer era. Everyone's chasing followers, likes, and reach. The temptation, though, however, even in Christian spaces, is to measure success by numbers, by engagement, by metrics. But the Desert Father Spirit says, I don't need a stage to be faithful. I don't need followers to have authority. My authority comes from the life I live before God Almighty in secret. Guys, a new generation of Desert Fathers won't be seduced by the spotlight. They will be content with hiddenness, because hiddenness produces a set apartness that eventually gives way to wisdom that changes the world. I want you to think of the difference between a viral clip and a mentor. A viral clip might inspire you for 60 seconds, but a mentor, a father, can shape you for 60 years. And guys, we've built a culture obsessed with clips, but starving for fathers. And the new Desert Fathers will say, I don't care about going viral. I care about going deep. Secondly, Desert Fathers, a new generation of Desert Fathers, they live with radical authenticity. Guys, our world is filled with polished images, curated feeds, and staged personas. Even in the church, we've turned ministry into branding. But the Desert Father Spirit refuses to play that game. They don't project an image, they live a reality. They don't market authenticity, they embody it. And that authenticity is what this generation is starving for. People don't need more sermons. They need lives worth imitating. Another father, St. Benedict, who came later but built on the desert tradition, said, prefer nothing whatever to Christ. See, friend, that's authenticity. Not living for approval, not living for applause, not living for an image, living for Christ alone. Guys, thirdly, a new Desert Father generation builds communities of formation. Because let's be real, discipleship doesn't happen in a crowd. It happens in circles. It happens around tables. It happens in a shared life. See, the Desert Fathers didn't just live alone. They eventually gathered into communities that became the foundation of monasticism. Now, again, I'm not here trying to appeal to you for a monastic Christianity. I believe that was helpful in that moment. But eventually those became communities, and those communities preserved the scriptures. They discipled generations, and they carried the faith through the dark ages. We need that again, guys, not monasteries necessarily, but communities of transformation, of formation, small groups, masterminds, households where people are formed, not just informed. Think of it in business terms, okay? You don't build a sustainable company by hosting one flashy launch event. You build it by developing systems and rhythms and culture that carry the vision long after the hype fades. See, the church is no different. The kingdom is no different. You don't build disciples with hype. You build disciples with intentional formation. Now, again, I hope you hear what I'm saying. I definitely believe that encounters are primary because we can do formation without presence and formation without supernatural encounters with Jesus, and that doesn't work either. You'll have to spend the rest of your life disciplining yourself and fighting yourself if you don't have an encounter. But once you have an encounter with Jesus, it takes that intentional formation to the next level, okay? Fourth thing, a new Desert Father generation embraces what Eugene Peterson called a long obedience in the same direction. In other words, they're not chasing quick results. They're not trying to trend for a season. They're playing the long game. They're taking the long path. They know that true transformation takes time, that building people is slow, that raising sons and daughters is messy, but they're willing to give their lives to it. It's like a tree again. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It takes years for roots to go deep, for branches to stretch wide, for fruit to appear. But once it's established, it weathers storms. It provides shade. It multiplies life. See, that's the kind of leadership that America needs right now, not weeds that spring up fast and die, trees that last for generations. I want my children's children to rest under the shade of my branches. Fifthly, lastly, desert fathers see wealth as a tool, not a trophy. And here's where this intersects with kingdom entrepreneurship, because I'm always going to be championing that, okay? Too many Christian leaders have had a broken view of money. They either idolize it or they demonize it. But the new desert father generation will see money for what it is, a tool for building, a tool for generosity, a tool for impact. They won't live for luxury. They'll live for legacy. They won't use the money to elevate themselves. They'll use money to empower communities. Because you can't disciple people if you're drowning in debt. You can't build sustainable communities if you don't understand economics. See, the desert fathers lived in simplicity. The modern desert fathers will live in stewardship. I want you to remember Deuteronomy 8:18. It says, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant." Okay? That's the posture. Wealth as covenant fuel, not personal treasure. So what does a new desert father generation look like? They resist platform addiction. They live with radical authenticity. They build communities of intentional formation. They embrace a long path view of obedience in the same direction, and they see wealth as a tool, not a trophy. In short, they live lives that can't be measured by likes or follows, but by fruit. And if we want to see America discipled again, it won't be because we filled another stadium. It will be because we raised up another generation of desert fathers and mothers who chose the way of depth over the way of hype. So what does all of this mean for you that are watching this, or those of you that are listening to this on the podcast? Because it's easy to look back at Billy Graham or to admire Anthony the Great and think that this is just about history. But the truth is, this is about you. This is about me. This is about us right now in this cultural moment. The question isn't, where are the desert fathers? The question is, will you become one? For the entrepreneur listening, you can embody this. You don't have to chase virality. You don't have to build your business on gimmicks and hypes and TikTok dances. You can build something rooted in wisdom, something sustainable, something that forms people, not just sells to them. For the parent listening, you can embody this. Your home can become a place of that intentional formation, a place where your kids don't just learn Bible stories, but they learn rhythms of prayer and generosity and hosting the presence of God. For the pastors or the messengers that are listening, you can embody this. Your voice doesn't have to be loud to be weighty. Your platform doesn't have to be big to be effective. If you've gone deep with God, your words will carry the authority of someone who's been with him. See, Jesus told a story about two builders, one built on the sand, the other one built on a rock. And when the storms came, only one house stood. See, events are sand, crowds are sand, platforms are sand, but that intentional yes to formation into the image of Jesus, that's rock. Character, that's rock. Wisdom, that's rock. And guys, I'm gonna be honest with you. The storm's here. America is shaking. The church is shaking. Our culture is shaking. And the only voices that will stand are those who have built on the rock. Richard Foster put it this way: superficiality is the curse of our age. The desperate need today is not for smarter people or more gifted people, but for deep people. And guys, that's the call of the Desert Father Spirit, to go deep, to resist the superficial, to become people of substance in a world addicted to style. So here's my challenge to you. Stop waiting for another Billy Graham to rise. Stop waiting for another stadium event to fix our nation. Stop waiting for another celebrity preacher to carry the burden. Step into your assignment. Be a father, be a mother, be a voice of wisdom in your lane, whether that's business, media, education, just in your own home as a family or government. The battle of our time is not for attention, it's for intentional formation. And guys, you have what it takes to form lives. Remember the tree again. The weed looks impressive fast, but it dies just as fast. The tree grows slow, rooted, hidden, but it lasts for generations. Be the tree. Because when America looks back at this moment, it won't be the weeds that made the difference. It'll be the trees. So I'll say this one last time. America doesn't need another Billy Graham. It doesn't need another stadium crusade. It doesn't need another wave of celebrities. America needs desert fathers, desert mothers. America needs you. And before we close, I want to ask you for one simple thing. If this episode has stirred you, if it gave you language or clarity for what you've been sensing, would you do me a favor? Go subscribe to the Mark Casto program. Leave us a 5-star review. It may feel small, but it helps us push this message further. Put wisdom back into the mainstream and help us raise up a generation of messengers who will not sell out and burn out. So hit subscribe, drop a review, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it or watch it, and together we can see wisdom invade the culture again. God bless you guys. Hope you have an amazing night.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. If this spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend, leave a review, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss the wisdom that's shifting lives and systems. Until next time, keep building with clarity and fire.